Hi, I'm Kim. I work for Newmarket in District Youth for Christ. Welcome to Snapshots, episode 3 on prayer. You might have thought about prayer before and thought that it's boring and pointless. Well, today we're going to try and get to the heart of what God says about prayer by breaking it down into 3 questions: the what, the how, and the why of prayer. So first on the table, what is prayer? I bet if I asked you what are the things that you do most with your friends, you would say, we hang out and we chat. Whether you're together like at school or at college, or you're playing sports together, you are chatting and talking, probably more than you are silent. And when you're apart, you're sending each other WhatsApps, messengers, Snapchats, emails, you're talking over games together. Walking and talking together is a huge part of friendship. And it's the same for God. We're told in the Bible at the beginning of creation, when God created people, his intention was to have friendship with them. He wanted to walk and talk with them. And the first people, and the Bible calls them Adam and Eve, had that friendship with God. And where they lived in the Garden of Eden, in paradise, God would come and they would walk together and talk face to face like you and your mates can talk. And that is the heart of friendship, and that was God's intention for people. But of course it all went wrong when Adam and Eve decided that they didn't want to live the way that God had asked them to live, and they decided to go their own way, and in that moment the friendship was broken. And maybe some of you have experienced that. You know what it's like to have a broken friendship and how communication stops. You stop chatting together and you stop hanging out together, and that's what happened with people and God. But that wasn't the way he wanted it. He's always wanted and has always pursued people in order that he could hang out and chat. Now, the Christian idea of prayer is rooted firmly in this idea of friendship. Prayer is walking and talking with the Lord. So moving on to question 2, why do we pray? Perhaps you've thought before, praying is just completely pointless. It's a waste of time because God is all powerful and he's going to do what he's going to do and he's in control. We're just human beings. So what is the point of praying, because we can't change the mind of God? Well, I think we're about to find that God actually has really different intentions for prayer, and it's far from pointless. So if we take a look at Jesus, who was actually the Son of God, not just human, but human and God. If we look at him and his life, he had the most amazing ministry, if you take time to read the Gospels, of bringing freedom and healing to people. He preached it and he ministered it. His ministry was electric and epic. And yet, scattered throughout the Gospel, you will find these tiny takeaway verses, I call them, really small verses, which tell us that Jesus was a praying man, because Jesus was the friend of God. Jesus spent so much time praying. The Bible tells us that he would just go, just on his own, out into the wilderness to pray. He would go away from everyone else. He would get up early in the morning before he started his day. Jesus' prayer life was like the engine room of his ministry. Jesus was completely dependent on walking and talking with the Lord in order to walk and talk with people. Now, there's an amazing picture of this in the book of Revelation, which is the last book of the Bible. Revelation is a crazy book. It is full of wild, crazy pictures that sometimes really difficult to understand. But what the writer is trying to do is paint vivid pictures that demonstrate to us a spiritual reality behind what we can actually see with our eyes. So the Bible tells us that a lot of the things of God are unseen, whereas our life, you can see stuff, right? You can see your food, you can see your friends, you can see the world about you, but a lot of the stuff to do with God is unseen. And what the book of Revelation tries to do is to paint a picture to explain that unseen world. Now, Revelation does that in a few verses in chapter 8. It tries to explain the unseen spiritual world that is going on when people pray. Now, what the writer says is he describes this scene in heaven, this temple, this heavenly temple, and this huge throne, and God himself is sat upon the throne, and there are angels with him. Now, angels are messengers of God and they do his work. And there are angels and they have censers. A censer was a metal item that you would use to burn incense, which is like perfume, and a fragrance would fill the temple. And that incense was the prayers of the saints. Saints just means holy people. It means people who have been made right with God through Jesus. The prayers that we're talking about, the prayers that John is seeing in this censer, this metal basket, are your prayers and my prayers. If you know Jesus and you have spoken to God, your prayers are in the very presence of God in his heavenly throne room. So the angel takes these prayers and they're all collected up, and he takes fire from the altar which is in front of the throne, and the fire represents the power of God, and he mixes it with the prayers of the people and he throws it back down to earth, and it achieves God's purposes. Now here's two things that I want you to see from this amazing description of the unseen powers that work behind our prayers. One is that your prayers are always heard, and number two, the power of prayer, when it is mixed with the power of God, is the way that God achieves his purposes on earth. Last up, how do we pray? You might say, well, that's great. Prayer sounds amazing, but I have no idea how to get started. And that's okay, because even Jesus' disciples had to ask him how to pray. Keep it real, keep it simple, and keep it up. And these are things that Jesus taught. First, keep it real. When you walk and talk with a friend, you don't put on a mask. The best friends are those ones that you can be yourself with. Jesus wants to be our best friend. In prayer, when you're talking with God, bring your real self. Jesus' prayer life included bringing his pain and fear to the Lord. In the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus was afraid and he was fearful. And you know what he did? He got down onto his knees and he prayed, and God ministered to him. However you're feeling, bring it to the Lord. Keep it simple. It's not about the words that you use. So many people are frozen in prayer because they think it's about words. You know, Jesus had a lot to say about the Pharisees who prayed just because they thought they sounded great and religious. Prayer is not about the outside delivery, it's about your heart. And finally, keep it up. Jesus taught so much into this idea that prayer is something we're to persevere in. And many times he taught parables where he was like, don't give up, keep on praying. So if you don't know how to pray, keep it real, keep it simple, and keep it up. God bless you. See you next week.